Hello, it's Simo Ahava from Finland, um, doing yet another video, which I don't know if it makes any sense. But this time I felt compelled to do another video simply because the article I wrote ended up being kind of complex, and I feel like the best way to walk you through the steps and to show how it's actually pretty simple is to show it in the video. And the subject matter of this video is how to create your own cookie rewrite web service. And now when you're wondering why would I need something like that, the reason is that with the intelligent tracking prevention releases from the Safari web browser, we have a problem with first-party cookies set by JavaScript, set by third-party vendors such as Google Analytics or Google Ads. And these cookies are needed to persist state. For example, in Google Analytics, we need to know that the browser um, is the same browser that visits on subsequent days. And what intelligent tracking prevention does is it basically caps the expiration of these cookies to a maximum of 7 days. And in some cases, it's even shorter, it's only 24 hours. So if your visitors visit your site with the Safari browser and they take more than 7 days between visits, Safari's ITP will make it so that these people are always recognized as a new user as a consequence, which will kind of mess up your data somewhat. And even if it doesn't, it's still a fun exercise to work against. And what we'll be building today is an API running on the Google Cloud Platform, which basically lets you request for cookies that don't have this expiration cap, because there's a specific mechanism you can use with a server, web server, such as one running on the cloud, which is not impacted by these latest releases of ITP. So in this video, we'll walk through all the steps you'll need to take, and you can also read the accompanying article, and be sure to check the description of this video because all the necessary links are there. So enjoy, and I'll talk to you soon. So here we go. Um, As I said, this video is accompanied by an article, which you will find on my blog at the same time that this video is released. And the article goes step by step through the same stuff. So if you prefer reading things, it might be easier, especially if you're already familiar with how the Google Cloud Platform infrastructure works. So the article has a hopefully as comprehensive approach to this. So let me just quickly show you what the problem is. So the problem essentially is that on the Safari browser, for now, it might come to other browsers as well, such as Firefox. If you visit a site that uses, for example, Google Analytics, Google Analytics uses the _GA cookie found down here. I'll zoom in a bit. The _GA cookie with this client identifier to recognize that the same browser is visiting on subsequent days, for example. And the Google Analytics cookie has a default timeout of 2 years. And every single time the GA tracker is initialized, and every single time you send something to GA, the cookie expiration is updated to a new 2-year time, which means that basically, as long as the user visits within 2 years the site again, they will be recognized as the same browser, with the typical caveats that if they delete all their cookies, well, naturally, then they'll be recognized as a new user the next time they visit. So cookie deletion is, of course, something that we are very aware of in web analytics, and it's something that we have to keep in mind will always be a data quality issue. But what Safari does is it actually takes the GA cookie and it caps it at a 7-day expiration. So this video is recorded on the 12th. And as you can see, the expiration is 7 days in the future. So even if I reload the page, let me just show you the timestamp. So if I reload the page, you can see that the cookie is still 7 days in the future, and that's just something that the minutes are updated all the time, but it's always 7 days into the future. And this is problematic because it's entirely typical to take more than 7 days to visit a site again. I know that people do that on my sites, and I'm totally fine with that. Feel free to take your time and deliberate. But this is especially problematic for e-commerce stores, for example, that might have a high seasonality change, and they still want to attribute traffic to certain campaigns And 7 days is, in my opinion, 7 days is still short enough time to get decent attribution. So without going into the debate of what ITP should be doing and is it a good thing, let's just look at a technical solution. So let's not whine and complain, but let's actually enter solution mode. So what we're trying to build here is something that you can see actually in effect on my site itself. So you can see that the GA cookie is running here as well, but it has an expiration of 2 years in the future. It's not exactly 2 years because there's a little check that only refreshes the cookie every 6 days, just so that I can keep the API traffic down. You don't necessarily need this, but it still works. So we've solved this on my site. And the way that it works is that when the GA library builds the GA cookie and sets it to an expiration of 2 years, and the Safari sets it to 7 days, what we actually do is as soon as it has fired, as soon as the GA library has fired and it's created the cookie, we actually pull an API that's now running on this tracker.cmoahaba.com domain. You can't try this on from your site because I've restricted access to only my domain. And we're telling it basically in the request that, hey, I have a cookie named GA whose value is this, and this is taken from the actual value created by the GA library. And I want it to be written on the path, on the root path and the root domain. This is very important. It has to be the root domain with a maximum age of 2 years. And the API actually responds with a set cookie header. So it takes your API request and turns it into a set cookie header. And this set cookie header has the same values just turned into a document cookie set cookie protocol format. And you can see that the expiration is 2 years in the future. So when you then check your cookie details, you can see that it's actually set to expire in the future. So here you go. Safari is a bit slow to update the cookie details. So what we'll be building is this endpoint, and then I'll show you how to integrate it with Google Analytics. And we'll just jump into the Chrome browser for this. And what you'll need for this, you'll need actually 3 or 4 components. The first thing you'll need is for some command line things like you'll need Git. So Git is a version control system that you can install on any operating system. You'll need Git because the source code is in a GitHub repository of mine. It's very easy to use, and I'll show you how to use it. You don't need to create GitHub credentials. All you'll need to do is install this command line tool. There are other options as well, such as some graphical user interfaces if you prefer them, but I'll be using the command line tools. You'll also need the Cloud SDK, so follow the link in the video description and install it on your machine. Don't initialize it yet because we'll initialize it after we've created the project. You'll also need a credit card so that you can actually create the project in Google Cloud. And one thing that you'll need is possibility to modify the DNS settings of one of your domains, because you'll need to create whatever domain you want to call this web service from. For example, I want to now configure it on gtmtools.com because this currently has the problem with the cookie. So I need to reserve a DNS that is a subdomain of gtmtools.com. I'll be using something called tracker.gtmtools.com, but what's important is that it has to share the root with whatever domain you're using to call the API from. That's absolutely necessary because when the request sends the set cookie header, the set cookie header is respected in a first-party context only if it writes the cookie on the same root domain as from where the cookie was, where the request originated from. Otherwise, it's considered a third-party cookie, which will have its own set of problems and is way beyond the scope of this video. But we want to solve the first-party cookie problem, so you'll need to have access to a subdomain that you can modify the DNS settings for. So let's get started. The first thing you'll have to do is visit this URL, consolecloudgoogle.com/cloud resource manager. And here you'll click the create project button. And now you'll need to name your project and give it an ID. And this just has to be something unique. The ID should be something that's easy for you to remember. So let me just create a project call called tracker.gtmtools.com. You can edit the IE from here. Like I said, it's a good idea to, oops, I can't use that. So let's just use tracker.gtmtools.com. Horrible casing, I'm sorry. And the project ID, let's do tracker-gtmtools.com. These are unique across the entire Google Cloud platform. So if you try to use something that's already reserved, it will tell you, such as I think test might be taken or test project. Yeah, so it just tells you it's not available. Tracker-gtmtools.com is not taken, so that's fine. It will tell you to log this with create a billing account. I already have a billing account, but you will need to create a billing account. I can't remember, it will either tell it to you right here and now, or it will tell you when you try to enable a specific API. But whatever the case, you need to create a billing account. The instructions are very clear. You'll need to add your credit card. You can add budgets to your billing by visiting billing here. You can add a budget that says, for example, you will only let the project use $5 a month. So that's a good idea to do so that you don't accidentally blow past your budget if you have an extremely high traffic site, if you just want to test this out. So when you're done, you just click create. And when it's done, it will stop the spinner and show that the project has been created, and you can click to that project. And this is the dashboard for the GCP. I won't be going in depth to how the GCP works. There are lots of other great guides for that, but I will show you exactly what you need to do here. The next thing you need to do is you need to enable a specific API so that you can actually use the project or refer to the project from the command line. So we'll need to look for the Cloud Build API, click to that, make sure your project is selected in the selector, and then just click enable. And now it might tell you that, hey, you need a billing account, so make sure you have the billing account enabled first. And here we go, we're done now. So the next thing you'll do is you'll need to install the Google Cloud SDK command line interface. And there are instructions for different platforms here. And then you need to open your command line software. I'm using the OS X terminal. And the next thing you want to do is make sure you've also got Git installed. So there are different ways to install Git and download it. So there's the downloads option here, and then there's installing Git here. You can install it with Linux and macOS. macOS actually comes with Git pretty using the Xcode installer. You Windows and so on. But what you need is the ability to run Git version, and it will tell you that Git has been installed on your local machine. So now that Git is installed, you need to browse to a directory where you want to install the source code for the project. So just create some kind of directory here. Let's do GTM tracker. No, actually, let's not do anything here. Next, what you need to do is visit my GitHub repository. So github.com/sahava-cookie bouncer service. And here behind the screen link, you'll find a URL that you need to copy. Either click the clipboard button here or just Command C or whatever. And then when you're in the directory under which you want to add the source code, you just run git clone and then paste the URL and hit enter. Oops, I need to delete it first. So git clone, and there we go. And then it tells you it creates a folder called cookie bouncer service. So then you'll just go into that and do a quick list to see that all the files are there. The only one file that you'll need, or there are two files that you'll need, the app.js, which actually runs the entire front end, and then app.yaml that has the configuration for App Engine. And you can take a look at what the app.yaml does, and it's just a single line that tells that you want to run the app on Node.js. And if you want to take a look at what app.js does, here's what it looks like. So actually, at this point, we could actually do this. So open app.js in whatever software you want, and find this const allowed hosts array. because in this array, you need to list all the host names from which you'll be calling the API. So you need to, this is actually a bit misleading. I'll need to update the repo. It's not the hosts that have been mapped to the endpoint that will make requests to the endpoint. So for example, this is the default simohub.com. What I'll add here is actually gtmtools.com, because like I said, I will be pulling the API from www.gtmtools.com. If I had other subdomains of GTM tools, I would have to add them here as well. So something like, I could have sub.gtmtools.com. I could even have just gtmtools.com or whatever. But I just have www.gtmtools.com, so I'll leave that there. And then save it and escape or close the software. And now that if you need to make sure that you have the gcloud SDK installed. So make sure that it shows you something like this, version 249.0.0 or whatever. I can't remember when I've last updated it, but I think that's a pretty new version. And now what you need to do is run gcloud init. And it will ask you, what's your current account? Because I've already initialized, it will tell me either reinitialize or create a new configuration. So what I'll do is I'll just reinitialize so that we can go through this step by step. So then it tells me that it checks your network connection and everything else. And then it asks, choose the account you would like to use to perform operations for this configuration. And now you need to choose the same Google account with which you just created the Google Cloud project. And for me, that's my Gmail account. So now you're logged in, and now it tells you, so which project do you want to use as the default? And this is nice because it just lets you automatically configure the project for the command line. So I need to find my project here, and I can see that it's number 11, tracker.gtmtools.com. So I'll just hit enter there. And then it tells me that, hey, congratulations, Google Cloud SDK is configured and ready to use. So now we can basically start running commands on the Google Cloud using the gcloud command line option. So I'll just clear that. And now the first thing you have to do is create a new App Engine application. App Engine is what we'll be using. It's a scalable serverless cloud infrastructure. It's basically a web server running on the cloud, which is fully managed for you. You really don't have to do anything. As you can see, my configuration only had a single line, which tells that the runtime is Node.js 10. Of course, you can do really complex things with App Engine as well. But you don't have to use App Engine. You can build a full compute engine instance as well, which gives you far more options for scale. App Engine isn't the fastest. It doesn't have the best response times, but we don't actually need speed in this case. We just need it to respond with a response to our occasional requests. App Engine also has a very generous free tier. Basically, I'm generating something like 7,000 requests to the API a day, and everything is free for me. I'm not surpassing the free tiers, but if you're generating if you have lots and lots of visitors every day, you'll need to think about whether to keep with App Engine and accept that there might be some higher costs, or move to Compute Engine where you have more control over the scope. But you can try with App Engine, and there are ways to optimize it that I'll show you a bit later. So what you'll need to do here is run gcloud app create. And it tells you that you are creating an app for project tracker gtmtools.com. And it's irreversible, blah, 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 and region cannot be changed. So now just choose a region, whatever you want, but you might want to choose a region that's geographically close to the location of yourself, or where the majority of your visitors come, or whatever is most comfortable with you. Maybe you have to take into account something like GDPR. So for me, I'll just take Europe West. As you can see, all of these support both the standard and the flexible App Engine environments. We'll be using standard because that's the free option and very easy to set up. Flexible has a bit more options for scale, but we'll be using standard. So then we hit number 6 and just wait for it to create the project or create the application. Great, so now the app has been created, and because I've already provided you with app.yaml, which is the configuration file, or YAML. I don't know how I'm supposed to pronounce that, but let's not worry about that. You can just run the next command, which is gcloud app deploy. And then it will tell you, hey, I want to deploy an app from this source. So the configuration is the YAML file here. I want to use the source code in this directory. The project is tracker.gtmtools.com. Service and version, you don't have to worry about those. And the target URL tells you what the App Engine endpoint will be when that app has been deployed. So I'm good with all of that. And then it takes a while for the service to update. I've of course fast forwarded in time because I have the power to do so. Then it tells you it sets up traffic split, and finally you should be done. So now you can actually see if the web service works. So you can just type Google App Browse, and it will open your endpoint in the web. And now if you see this message, cannot get dash, don't worry, it actually means that the whole thing is working. Because this is what your API returns when somebody tries to run a GET request to it. And what we just did was run a GET request. It will actually work just fine with the post request, but this just means that everything is working. So good job, it's running, perfect. However, as you can see, the domain of this service is now trackergtmtools.com.appspot.com. And that's not good, because what we actually need is to have this respond from tracker.gtmtools.com, which has no endpoint. So we need to figure out how to map our custom domain to trackergtmtools.com.appspot.com. So what you'll need to do is visit your project in the Google Cloud, and here find the App Engine product and click over to settings. I'm pretty sure you could do this on the command line as well, but maybe it's nice to step inside the App Engine as well for a while. So here you can see the custom domains option, so click that open. And then we'll want to add a new custom domain to this endpoint, so click Add Custom Domain. And now you basically, if you've already verified domains, it will give you a list of them. And to be honest, I wouldn't have to do these steps because I've already verified gtmtools.com. But I'll just show you what the steps would be, and then we can kind of skip this part later. So we want to verify a new domain. Then you type the domain name you want to use that you have DNS access to. So tracker.gtmtools.com, and then click verify. And what now happens is it actually throws you into the Webmaster Central, where it tells you that, hey, you need to verify this domain by using your DNS, your domain name provider. So if you have your domains from one of these hosts, domain registrars up here, they'll give you the exact instructions you need to do to set things up. For example, I have GoDaddy, so I'll just choose godaddy.com. And what it tells you is that you need to add a new TXT record to your DNS. So text records are basically just text strings that you can store into the domain name settings. So when Google then queries for this text record, it will find this verification code there and know that you are actually the owner of the domain. So for example, with GoDaddy, what I would have to do is go to, sorry, it's in Finnish, but you would have to go to the DNS management and then click to add a new record. You choose TXT as the type. You can leave the host as the root, and then you just paste the TXT value into the relevant field. And the TTL can stay in 1 hour, which is the default. And then you save the record. And now basically what happens is that the DNS record will start propagating. It will take a while. So you can try clicking verify every now and then, but it will take a while for the record to propagate. It might even take up to 24 hours, which I've never seen that happen. It typically takes less than an hour. But what you have to do now is just basically wait for this domain to be verified by the Webmaster Central. And then when you're done, you can basically go down here and it will tell you that your domain has been verified. But because I've already verified GTM tools, I can jump a bit forward in time and choose the root domain. And then I will just tell it that first I will I will remove these domains that have already been mapped, and now we'll just add tracker.gtmtools.com. So now it will tell me that the following domain and subdomains will be mapped, and the checkmark says that everything is okay. And this is important. Google will add a free auto-renewing SSL certificate to your application, which is pretty nice. So you don't even have to worry about SSL, where you can still upload your own certificate if you want like full end-to-end encryption. But this will protect the endpoint itself. So you will have a single layer of security, which is better than nothing. So then when you click continue, it'll actually tell you that you need to update your DNS records. So this is now important. You need to add these A and AAAA and CNAME records to your DNS. And basically, these should not mess anything up in your existing setup. Naturally, if you're trying to point a domain that's already mapped, you will run into problems. So you need to make sure that you're using a subdomain that is not already mapped to something. So we can now just I already have the 4A record, so I'll just add the new A records. So again, in GoDaddy, we'll do an A record, set to the host, to the root, pointing to the first A record. And there's 4 of these. I've done this so many times that I actually know it by heart. So let's add a second one. That's the change. Then number 3. There we go. And then the last one. Then there was one, like I said, I already have the AAAA record, so I'm not going to do those again. The one last thing you need to do is create a CNAME where the alias is tracker, so that binds the tracker.gtmtools.com to the endpoint with ghs.googlehosted.com as the data or as the host. So what we'll do again here is create a new CNAME record. Host is tracker, and it's pointing to ghs.googlehosted.com. So now we've got our records. I've got our CNAME record here. I've still got the site verification. You want to keep the site verification there so that Google will always know that you verified the domain. And then there's the 4A records and then the A records. So at this point, you can click done. It says DNS changes can take up to 24 hours and your SSL certificate will take several minutes to activate. So now click done. And now you'll see a little spinner here fixing the SSL certificate for the domain. So now you can just wait for the spinner to complete. You can also just try visiting your domain without SSL to see if the endpoint has already been mapped. So that's what I'm going to do now. So as you can see, it hasn't been mapped yet. So now I'll just wait and maybe jump into the future a little. So here we are in the future, and now you can see that tracker.gtmtools.com is actually responding with the cannot get. I still want the SSL certificate to come through, so now you can see that that's actually done as well. So here you can see the managed certificate for tracker.gtmtools.com has been activated. So what we actually now have, let's just recap, is that we've created the App Engine project that serves as the web service. It's running on node.js, and it was very easy to set up. I hope you'll agree with that. So all you had to do is create a project and then upload the app to the App Engine. You don't even have to configure anything except for the allowed hosts in the JavaScript file. And then you mapped your custom domain tracker.gtmtools.com or whatever you want to use through your domain name service settings. And now the endpoint responds from the URL that you configured. So we have everything in place to actually create the API with. So what you'll need to do, I'm going to be using GTM, but there are ways to do this with analytics.js and with gtag.js. So be sure to check out the written guide for tips on those. So in GTM, this is a very simple container, so it will be, of course, more complicated in your setup. what you'll need to do is add a field to every single tag, every single Google Analytics tag that is firing on your site. This field must be on every one of those. If there's even a single GA tracker that's created without this field, this whole thing will be at risk of failing. So since I only have one tag, it's easy to add it just to its fields, but of course the thing you'll want to be using is a Google Analytics settings variable. So maybe I'll just use that for good measure. So you'll need to scroll down to more settings, fields to set, and then add a new field named cookie update false. So let me tell you that what this field does. Every single time that a GA tracker is created, so basically every time a GTM tag fires, the tracker first checks, does the underscore GA cookie already exist? If the cookie doesn't exist, the tracker creates a new cookie with a 2-year expiration with a randomly set Google Client ID. Now, every time your GA sends something to the Google Analytics library, sends something to GA, it updates the cookie expiration to a new 2-year expiration time. So that's the way that the cookie is constantly kept refreshed. So as long as the user visits the site within 2 years, they'll always get a new 2-year cookie. We don't want this to happen anymore because every time Google does this, it actually writes a JavaScript cookie. And the JavaScript cookies are always going to be susceptible to this expiration problem in Safari. So we only want the GA library to create the cookie because its cookie creation mechanism is actually pretty nice. But after that, it should never again refresh the cookie when the tracker loads. So that's what the cookie update field does. By setting it to false, any tag with this field will not update the expiration of the cookie because we want to manage the expiration ourselves using the API. If you have cross-domain tracking, now is the time to add the allow linker field as well. So you're using the allow linker to let Google handle cross-domain linking for you, which is again very important. You want to let the library do all this cookie stuff because you'll then run the API call after the tag has fired. So what we'll do here is simply just save this as a GAS variable and then add it to the tag. So now this tag has the cookie update false field. That's very important. So the next field that we'll do, the whole thing runs on something called hit callback. You could use other methods as well, such as custom task, but we'll be using hit callback because it's actually pretty self-explanatory. Or it's not self-explanatory, but it's a callback, so it happens after the tag has fired. And we want this to happen after the tag has fired because by then we're sure that the GA cookie has been created with all the necessary settings. So what we'll do is create a new field called hit callback and then set its value to a new variable. So let's just call it hit callback cookie rewrite. And this variable is a custom JavaScript variable. Now, you're wondering why wouldn't you be using the new custom templates feature? Or maybe you're not wondering, I'm wondering for you. The problem with templates at the moment is that there's no way to do a post request with them. So we can't use the template APIs for this. You could turn the endpoint into a get endpoint instead. So just like a pixel, for example, which would then work with custom templates. But there are some problems with get endpoints, or not problems, but you need quite a bit more configuration to make sure that they're secure and that people can't just spam your endpoint and thus cause you a lot of expenses in the cloud platform. So we'll be using post for now, which means that we'll need the custom JavaScript variable. And then now you'll need to copy a little. So find the article and find the hit callback code, which is basically this little thing here. I'll just copy paste it there and then tell you what it does. So this hit callback returns a function because the hit callback always requires a function. So this has to return one for a hit callback to work. Here you need to modify two things. You'll need to change the address of the endpoint, and this is the URL of the API itself. So it's the one that you just mapped to your App Engine account. So you need to copy this and add it as the endpoint here. And then you need to take the root domain. So you could just, copy paste this or whatever. And this domain value has to be shared by the endpoint and the website from where you'll be calling the endpoint. So www.gtmtools.com and tracker.gtmtools.com have gtmtools.com as the commonality. So that's what we'll be using as the domain. So that's the domain on which the cookie is written. And that ensures that the cookie is available to the www.gtmtools.com. Then you'll see that there are two other variables that we'll need to create, cookie_GA and cookie_SafariPol. So let me tell you how this works. When the hit callback fires after the GA tag has completed, first it checks, does the GA cookie exist? If it doesn't, it just returns because there's something going on in the client's browser. For example, they're blocking cookies or something else. And in that case, this solution won't do anything. So we need to check that does the GA cookie work? If you're using a custom cookie name, be sure to update this variable when you're going to create it. And then it also checks, does this Safari API poll cookie exist? And the Safari API poll cookie is something I created to make sure the API is only polled every 6 days. So I don't want to constantly poll the API for no reason because the API only needs to be polled once and the response writes the cookie. So by querying it only every 6 days, we can be sure that the cookie doesn't expire if something happens, like some JavaScript manages to create a cookie after all. So this ensures that the API is only polled every 6 days. You could change it to just a single day by modifying an attribute later on. In cases where you're worried about the 24-hour expiration of some landing page cookies. But like I said, this API should make this basically, this API should make it that you don't have to query the poll API except once every 2 years. That's the whole point of the API. But naturally, users delete their cookies and so on. So you might want to just make sure that the expiration is updated every now and then. Though if they delete their cookies, it's to be expected that they also delete the poll cookie. But if they were to only delete the GA cookie, then this would be a problem. Then you can see that this is the API call itself. So it tells you what is the name of the cookie, what is the value of the cookie, and this comes from the GA cookie currently written by JavaScript. The path is always the root. The domain is the root domain you added up here. And then the expiration is set to 2 years. So that's 2 years in milliseconds. Then it runs the post request to the endpoint. It sets the content type as application JSON. It uses credentials because that's necessary for these pre-flight requests. And then it sends the data to the post endpoint. And after the data has been sent, it creates a new cookie named Safari API poll with the value true, set with an expiration of 6 days. And this is in seconds, not milliseconds. So if you wanted to make this under 24 hours, you could change this to 60 times 60 times 22, which would be a 22-hour cookie. So now this browser would poll the API every 22 hours. But like I said, for me, this is more than enough. So this is the hit callback variable that you'll then need to save. And if you wanted to use this solution for other cookies, all you need to do is basically take this bit and just call it in a custom HTML tag or whatever you want to use, and then just change the name of the cookie to, something else, such as my login cookie or my consent cookie value consent 1, 2, 3, and so on, and then the expiration to 13 months or whatever you want. So this is the API, and you can use it to write any cookies you want, but this example is just for GA. So then when you're done, you just save the hit callback and make sure that it lands in the correct field. So field name, hit callback, value, the JavaScript cookie. And then, like I said, you need to create 2 more variables. So 2 user-defined variables. So we'll create the cookie_GA first. So this returns the value of the GA cookie as created by the JavaScript library. So we'll save that. And then we'll create the cookie underscore Safari API poll with the name underscore Safari API poll. And then we're basically done. And now you can test this on Chrome. So let's go to preview mode. If you're running this on Safari, you will of course be able to test it on Safari as well. So naturally, Chrome doesn't have this problem, so there's no way to know if it's actually working perfectly just by looking at the cookies themselves. So on Chrome, the expiration is still set in 2 years into the future. But now we want to check that it's working correctly on Chrome. So go to the network requests. So open your developer tools. You'll find them somewhere. Over here, I think. So more tools, developer tools. So in developer tools, you click open the network tab. And now here you should be able to find your tracker with the two requests. The first one is a pre-flight request, which basically just polls the endpoint and asks, hey, is it okay if this site sends you a request? And that's how Google kind of protects the post endpoints. And then the second request should be an actual post request with a 200 status code. It has the payload of the cookie itself, so we want a GA cookie and so on. And the response should be a message that says processed cookies underscore GA. Now, Chrome is a bit weird. It doesn't actually, for me at least, it doesn't include the set cookie header in the response for some reason. I'm not sure why it does that, but it doesn't show that. So we'll need to actually, but just by looking at the response, you'll see that it actually processed the cookies. That's what my API tells you. And then you can see that it shares the domain. So it should work just fine. But just to be sure, let's now publish this container. Whatever you want to call it, something spiffy like that. So now this version has been published. So now you can go to Safari and then reload the page. Open Safari developer tools. You'll find them in develop, which you might need to enable first in Safari preferences, and then show JavaScript console, and just reload the page to make sure the request is sent. In the network tab, you should see a request for your tracker. So again, the header should be there just fine. The response should now have the set cookie header, and you should see an expiration of 2 years in the future, so 11th of June 2021. And now in storage, if everything worked correctly, yes, here we go, 11th of June 2021, and you can see the Safari API poll there as well. So after the 18th, 9:44 a.m., this browser will request for the cookie again. So now we've basically managed to create our little API, and you've created it in App Engine. And I hope that this video demystified the process, because I know that it was a bit complex if you read the article. I hope that you can see that there's actually only a few moving parts here, and everything is provided for you almost turnkey, so you don't have to create the application itself. The JavaScript can be downloaded. So now everything that's beyond this is up to you. You can modify this to work with your other cookies. You can move from App Engine to App Engine Flexible, or to Compute Engine to have more power and more scale. But like I said, this isn't a real-time API. You don't have to worry about instant responses. It's enough that the API is polled once while the user is visiting the site or on the page. It doesn't have to happen immediately. It just has to happen after the GA library finishes its work. You'll of course need to make sure that if you have multiple GA cookies, that they're all somehow handled. You have to make sure that the API request has the exact domain path. You don't need the leading dot, but the domain and the path have to match those of the GA cookie you're trying to override with the HTTP cookie. So just pay some attention to what you're doing, make sure the cookie values match, and that should be it. And you can do this to all your other cookies as well. You just have to make sure that whatever cookie you are overriding, the library that whatever that endpoint is using has to you have to prevent it from updating that cookie with a JavaScript cookie later on somehow. And maybe you can ask this in the blog comments or this video comments, because I don't know how these different libraries work that well, but I'm happy to take a look for you if you have specific questions. But this works beautifully for the GA library thanks to the cookie update field, which is a pretty recent addition, but it just makes sure that the GA library itself doesn't update the GA cookie. So once you're done with that, you can always visit your App Engine dashboard in the Google Cloud to see if you're going past your quota. So App Engine gives you basically 28 instance hours for free. On my site, I'm barely hitting 25 or 26 instance hours every day. So that's reset every 24 hours. So if you have a moderately traffic site, you'll be fine. Even if it goes past it, we're only talking about a couple of cents per instance hour. And instance hours are pretty intense works, especially because this endpoint is so ridiculously simple. It doesn't require that much power from App Engine. So this should be a very inexpensive solution for most sites. So anyway, this is it for the video. I hope that it's been informative, and like I said, I hope that it kind of demystifies the process. Feel free to ask me any questions in the comments or in the blog comments as well. There are other solutions as well that you can try. I've listed them in my original article about ITP. So you'll find there's the technical implications and solutions chapter, which has a number of things you can try, such as the edge cache or a reverse proxy suggested by some people I know or who have been commenting on the blog. So anyway, I'll leave you to this and I'll let you try the API yourself. And just don't try tracker.gtmtools.com because I'm going to be tearing that down right now. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them to me. Thank you so much and have a great day.